Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is now a special edition, our first special edition of Classical Discoveries. And the end, because you see already we are sitting in a different order, you know. It's because of this.
Well, it's very special because we have our first guest.
Yes, we have our first guest here. Welcome, Dr. Christoph Becher. I heard in Austria, doctor is very important. I don't think so. It's everywhere in the world very important.
Well, he's German. He wouldn't mind if
he's German, right? Okay. Christoph was former. I just learned dramaturg. It's in English like in German. A dramaturg or program director at the Konzerthaus Wien, at the Hamburger Staatsoper. And in his last job here in Vienna at the Radio Symphony Orchestra, also as a kind of chief manager.
General director.
General director, I'm sorry, yes, the general director, okay. I'm not a general director, but thank you that you are here. And we want to discuss with you now something very interesting, which I always ask myself. How do you make or prepare a season program?
Well, technically, you know what the title of this podcast will be, right?
No? Tell me.
How to keep audiences away from concerts.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a polemical part of the whole issue. But well, to come back, we will speak about that later. But to come back to Johannes' question, in regularly there are three parties to make the program. The first one is the chief of the orchestra. Second part is the conductor, and the third one is the presenter of the concert.
A chief of the orchestra is not the same like the conductor?
That would be you.
No, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's more okay. The general director.
Okay.
Yeah, and regularly all those three are talking so long as it need. Until they all are satisfied with the result.
Yeah, but one in the end have to say, now we do this, finish.
No. It's not like this. They really, in most cases, they are waiting until everyone is satisfied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to posit the following. The conductor says, I don't want to learn something new, or it'll take a lot of time. The chief, the general manager says, I want to put on an interesting program.
Yeah.
And the concert presenter says, I want to make sure that people come to the concert.
Sure.
So those are basically, very roughly speaking, the three elements that you have to work around, or is it different?
No, that's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's why they have so many changes. You know, nearly each week you can read in the newspaper, he is leaving the concertos, he is leaving the opera house, another comes in, you know. For me as a normal consumer, this is totally chaos.
You don't even go to concerts. So.
Not anymore.
No, those are the basic different interests of them, and it has to do in a way with your ability to negotiate. So as a general director of the orchestra, the first thing I have to do is to pull the conductor to my side, to say, okay, you don't have much time, so make your Brahms for heaven's sake, and then let us think about the first piece. Only 15 minutes, but let's do something contemporary here. For example, the
pseudo-modern thing.
Yeah. And with the presenter, I am on best speaking terms. So I know just in the beginning what the presenter, he or she will accept or not.
Right. Now, specifically in your last job with the Radio Symphony Orchestra, Radio Symphony Orchestras have traditionally, and to this day, a mission to play music that isn't not just the standards.
Sure.
To play contemporary music, to play modern music, as distinguished from contemporary, and all that is ultimately music that is harder to sell. So your job is a little bit different with a radio symphony orchestra than it would be with a Vienna Philharmonic, where you just play the standards anyway. So do you have to do more convincing, or do you have the liberties because people know if it's the RSO, well, that's part of the deal. We play that sort of music.
Yeah, but in my first job as a general director, which was the chamber orchestra of Württemberg in Heilbronn, I had to sell my programs. So I was flexible and for every task I took over.
But these programs really were more straight-minded, as for people to go in afternoon concerts with Mozart and Beethoven or something. You had to look that it's a common program.
Yeah, but anyway, even for this orchestra, I managed to bring something which is not so. For example, we did the 14th Symphony by Shostakovich, the special Lied von der Erde by Shostakovich, the 14th, because it's only for strings and I think it's one percussion player and then the two singers.
But it's outstanding for this area there, Heilbronn, or was this Heidelberg?
Yeah, no, Heilbronn, they accepted.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a good concert.
Because Heilbronn is something like the old aunts going to concert and drinking coffee and listening a bit to music. And so.
I had another story. We were on a tour to go to Korea and China, and I said, okay, if we as an Austrian radio symphony orchestra go on tour to these countries, we will bring with us a contemporary Austrian piece. Because every Norwegian or Finnish orchestra does, or Danish, it's part of the game. Only the German radio symphony orchestra used to go with Brahms and Tchaikovsky, and so I don't understand this attitude. So, but the presenters in Korea didn't want the contemporary piece, so it brought me to the point that I said, okay, if you don't want, we won't come. And so...
and who won?
Yes, half. Because...
You only played half of the contemporary piece.
No. The tour was on February 2020. So it was cancelled in January.
Okay.
You got out of that one. I would want to interject.
Bad luck.
If you are a Norwegian orchestra and you go abroad, you can do your standards and then you could put in something like sinding. Because
like what?
Like sinding.
Sinding, yeah.
Which is, first of all, not contemporary. It's barely 20th century, but it's definitely romantic. It gets the check mark on the Norwegian aspect of it and bringing your culture with it. But the presenters, if they know anything, will know, okay, well, it's not going to offend anyone. Now, as an Austrian orchestra, just playing an Austrian composer means nothing because all the great composers are Austrian. But you have to make it... I'm saying that with no, but the standards.
I know what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
Brahms is Austrian for all practical purpose from Hamburg, but that doesn't satisfy that requirement of doing something that's unique to both the country and that orchestra. And then you have to up the ante, as it were, to say, oh no, it's got to be contemporary Austrian. Do you still try to make it something contemporary that people might enjoy if they're really only just coming for the Brahms piano concerto or whatever else you played? What else would you have played actually?
Sure. I wouldn't present something which is edgy or annoying or something like that. Right. No. I know my audience, and you have to know it, and you have to make proposals which which you can get through. I mean, if you don't start a fight, you can't win in the end. So that was my idea for every program. So contemporary means contemporary.
Yeah.
It means the composer is still alive.
But coming back to your Concerthaus time, I mean, we could get out from the archive and you have some things to do. For example, you made a concert really with Henze. I need the English title, The Raft of the Medusa.
It's a masterpiece.
Medusa. It's a masterpiece, of course, but you made a concert with this, and you made a concert with Kurt Weill, Propheten. You made a concert, a full concert with. How many people have been in there? 3, 4? You and your wife?
No, it was full.
Really?
Yeah. In my, I mean, Fluss der Medusa was a Wien Modern concert.
Ah, okay.
And this was the case. The conductor wasn't too keen to do it.
Okay.
But I remember a telephone call where I had the courage to say I want it.
Okay.
So he said it's okay.
It's dear to your heart.
Okay.
You wrote the liner notes for this, and you have a history with that piece, right? I personally not quite sold on it, although after reading your liner notes, I almost was.
I organized the first performance in Hamburg, so you may remember that the premiere was disturbed by the police and by students, by riots.
Okay.
I should say. It was a scandal, one of the biggest concert scandals after 45.
Okay.
And so...
But this is partly because of the political content.
Yeah. The premiere was planned for 1969. Mm-hmm. And we did it in Hamburg the first time with the conductor Ingo Metzmacher in 2001.
Okay.
That was the premiere in Hamburg. The world premiere was in Vienna.
Okay.
Not in my time,
Okay.
but it was 71, I think, in the Concerthaus.
But I'm seeing you sitting in your bathtub and you make a seasonal program, and I say we make a branch and make this, and suddenly you say, and I do Henze, Flows of Medusa. Is it something like this, how you make this whole seasonal program?
Well, there's the first thing is to have an idea with the together with the conductor and together with the presenter. I prefer to speak first with the conductor. For example, our Bruckner series with Markus Poschner. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, Bruckner, we have to do it because you want to have the CDs.
I'm the guilty one. Yeah.
You want to have the recordings, but what to do in the first concert half. So I had the idea with contemporary music by women composers.
Okay.
So I came with this idea to Markus and then to the presenters.
Okay.
And everyone said, okay, let's do it. And then we made the commissions.
It sounds like easy going, but is the Vienna public different here than, for example, Hamburg? Or
yeah, it's it's an excellent public. I mean, audience. You mean the audience? The audience. The audience in Vienna is very curious about new music.
It's funny you should mention that, because earlier today I spoke to a few concert presenters in this town, and I asked them the question, what keeps audiences away? And I remember years and years ago, Markus Hinterhäuser, when he was the interim chief at the Salzburg Festival, he said, if you put on Schoenberg on the program, you have 20% less sales, period. And both of them said, 20%, that's all? That's very generous, or maybe that just works in Salzburg. names like Schoenberg, regardless of what the actual piece is.
Yeah, I
It
know.
could be the most romantic piece. Sales go down. Berg, Webern, same thing. And then I said, how does that differ from composers that they simply don't know about? A name they haven't heard of. It might be the most romantic piece. And they said, well, funny enough, you should mention that. Just recently we had a nice program, more or less standard, and then there was a piece by Dohnányi in there. You've recorded Dohnányi, you've done some Dohnányi actually.
Yeah, also with your orchestra. No?
Yeah.
We did a lot of Dohnányi,
It's beautifully romantic music,
Yeah.
it will hurt no one. And people were very reticent, and they actually had calls at the ticket office that said, this Dohnányi, is that another modern piece?
Das ist fein, das ist auch sehr wienerisch. Es gibt viele Walzer, Polka und Quadrille, die sind sehr lebendig und auch das macht irrsinnig Spaß, die zu musizieren.
People have been so abused by the sandwich, where you lure them into the concert and you play a Beethoven 5, and then you have like a Misson piano concerto in the first half, and then into the middle where no one can leave, you jam in some modern thing, a Fernie Howe, and no one came for that, and no one ends up liking it. So people have almost lost their faith in some presenters. I'm sure, obviously, your audience, as the Radio Symphony Orchestra's audience specifically, is used to something else. They tend to
they're
be
trained. Yeah, they're trained with the things.
But you really have to train an audience to trust you, and then it's on you not to abuse that trust.
Yeah, you're right. I know that with Schoenberg. I mean, that's a problem. I'm pretty sure of it. It's a really, really great problem because this music is, in my opinion, it's really old music, period.
It is old, but it doesn't mean it's beautiful.
But I have the feeling that people like Bartók in meanwhile more than Schoenberg. You know, Bartók is also a classical old thing.
This is something I wanted to tell. We had a series in the Concerthaus with the Alban Berg Quartet. So a series of 4 concerts, 2 series, so 8 concerts in total. Totally sold out since years.
Because of the Alban Berg Quartet?
Alban Berg Quartet.
Okay.
They loved it. And so then came one season, the Alban Berg said, okay, we want to do it another way. We do only 3 concerts with all 6 Bartóks, and in the midst of it, so no one can leave, a Mozart. Yeah. So Bartók, Mozart, Bartók, Bartók, Mozart, Bartók, and so on. Yeah. And we lost something like 20% in this season.
On account of Bartók, who is considered a classic in the string quartet world.
Yeah, but Bartók is like the quartets are demanding.
I'm surprised, but in that chamber music scene in Washington, D.C., Bartók was almost standard. Now, Washington, D.C. is a very specifically good chamber music town where the audience was really well trained, as it were, and they were excited and they would see anything almost. But yeah, so
They have
Schoenberg,
been all Hungarians. You know?
perhaps. But so let's go back to Schoenberg. You just wrote a book about Schoenberg, which has come out or is coming. You're presenting it tomorrow.
Yes, I will present it tomorrow in the Arnold Schoenberg Center. I'm very, very proud of it.
But what are you trying to tell us about Schoenberg in that book?
I want to teach my readers to hear. My experience is that I'm writing about music in a total other way if I am not counting the vowels.
Okay.
that makes a really great difference. So
let me just interject. Why would you be counting bars in the first place?
Oh well, to say to tell the readers, okay, look at bar number 3.
And return to the tonality.
Here the second violin goes quad interval upwards. And
terrible.
No one is interested. Sorry, a few people really are interested. These are always said also on the booklet writers. Please make a nice story behind.
Do you lead us in? Is it basically for someone who hitherto thought, oh, Schoenberg, I don't know, and they'll read this book and you lead them in? You're starting with the romantic stuff and then saying, okay, this is how you listen to the next piece, and this is how it's going to be more accessible.
Something like that. Okay. I'm starting with the Brahms, with the Brahms instrumentation, the
quintet,
the American Schemected, the clavier quintet, the piano quintet, and then come to Enchanted Night, Verklärte Nacht, and then. For example, Piroliner, Georgelieder, Jakobsleiter. I'm very proud of my.
This is heavy to present Jakobsleiter for people that don't know Schoenberg.
That's a funny thing. I have to confess that I never heard this piece before.
Okay.
And it was something totally new. And the last 10 minutes of the Jakobsleiter are so beautiful. And he is so visionary with this music, with the different orchestras.
So I have to wait 1 hour in the concert hall for the last 10 minutes?
No. 40 minutes.
40 minutes, okay.
And
it's like prolong. Dialog der Karmeliterin. You have to wait 1.5 hours for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the Liebestod in Tristan all the time.
Monteverdi. L'incoronazione di Popea.
But sorry, we are drifting totally away from our general theme. Coming back now to your amazing job you had the last 10 years, 30 years, okay. But you look like 22. No, sorry. But coming back to your amazing job you had the last years, what was the difference to make a program for the Vienna Concerthaus and then for the Hamburg State Opera and finally as a kind of chief producer for the Radio Symphony Orchestra in Vienna?
Well, in the Concerthaus I was a dramaturg to produce texts. This was my main task. We had 300 program notes each year, and I had to write.
You write them all? 300 program notes?
No. We were 2 persons.
Okay. But the other one was always lazy, so you had to write all of them.
He was very, very productive. It was Christian Lackner, one of the finest guys I ever met, to say this in front of the camera.
We cut it off, no problem.
As a dramaturg in an opera house, you have to talk with the stage directors. This is very important. Your task is to bring the stage director in a situation where he asks himself something which he never asked before. So
I think it's a very hard job, no?
Yeah.
I mean, stage orchestras are very, how you say, one man minded and they know everything.
Sure, they are.
Isn't it a general problem that the stage directors, no one can read anymore a score? They are all just.
They can.
Yeah?
Yeah,
they can.
Yeah. We had 11 productions with the stage director, Peter Kovichny, and he knows very good what happens
an old hero, of course. Yeah.
And he comes from a musical family. We just talked about him in our Behind the Wall podcast. The son of Franz Kovichny, of course, one of the great guys.
Yeah, his father.
But I also heard that you made some contemporary funny programs, New Year's concerts with Ingo.
Thanks,
Ingo Metzmacher.
thanks for talking about that. This was a series called "Who's Afraid of 20th Century Music?" The idea was to bring a New Eve concert with funny, danceable, smooth music, and the audience loved it. And the clue was we didn't say what we will play.
Okay.
So the audience read the program in the concert and not before. And it was every concert was sold out.
Maybe they should do this in general for.
Did you do that here in Vienna?
Music. No, in Hamburg.
No, only in Hamburg.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of Stravinsky and Shostakovich, I imagine.
No, we had Shostakovich or Khachaturian or also Dieter Schnebel. We had Anton Plate, which was very important for Ingo. And
You can dance on the music to Anton Plate?
in a way, yeah. I mean, at least you could try.
but no Henze, I suppose.
Henze, we had the Menadenjagd
Oh, okay.
from the Bassarit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This is 3 minutes.
That's an opera I can get behind. You know.
Yeah. I saw it in Salzburg a few years before.
Yeah, Munich put it on, and then I think they showed it 3 times and basically said never again because audiences stayed away in droves.
Yeah.
But it looks like you had a funny time there in Hamburg. No?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you moved to Vienna, to the radio.
No, after the Hamburg State Opera, I moved to the Elbphilharmonie
Okay.
without hall.
Yeah, it wasn't ready.
No, I worked there for 5.5 years. I had way to do with presenting the whole project and to tell the audience and the citizens of Hamburg about the idea of this project, of this new hall.
Why it's so expensive?
Yeah,
costs
for example,
so much taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so not an easy job.
And why it's so fascinating. And I had I brought up the whole education program of the
Okay.
And then Vienna.
And then, after 3 years in Heilbronn, I came back to Vienna for the second time.
Okay.
And had the great honor, it was an honor for me, as a German guy to lead this wonderful orchestra.
But you suddenly had also more chances to build the program, no? Together with Mary Nelsop and to create.
Yeah,
and I know because we also dealt in this time also during the pandemic and could do some wonderful recordings like this Dohnányi, The Vale of Pirate, or this Dohnányi and Leo Weiner, you know, or the Zemlinski Sinfonietta. These are all, thank you. It was possible that you said, yes, we do it.
There are a couple of projects that I really love that I think you had your hands in. The Spectre's Bride, was that you?
Yes, we did this together with Master Dvořák, the Spectre's Bride.
Yeah, the Geisterbride,
Yeah, it was an amazing concert.
This was Cornelius' idea to come back to the beginning of our talk, to bring the 4 late symphonische Dichtungen by Dvořák.
J'étais la blisque, j'étais la blisque,
Okay, we hope we could show you a bit behind the scenes what people like Christoph Becher are planning in their offices, in the concerthouses, how to keep people away or how to catch people for the concert seasons. Thank you very, very much. See you next time for another interesting podcast.